Okay, so welcome everybody to today's Q Primary Care webinar. My name is Ramya Matthew, I'm the convener for the group, and we have Professor Nigel Hart with us today. Nigel's going to be sharing his experience of trying to embed quality improvement in the GP trainee curriculum. And Nigel promises to be very candid and to share both the highs and the lows of this experience with us. Really looking forward to hearing your story. I'm going to hand over to Nigel. What we'll do is I'll keep an eye on the chat in the meantime. So if you've got questions that come up, please do put it in there, but we'll also allow at least 15 to 20 minutes for discussion at the end as well. So yeah, everyone join in if you can. Great, thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Can I just check that you can see my screen before I start blathering? Great. Well, thank you so much, Ramya. And I'd actually like to start by putting on record my appreciation for the outstanding leadership and advocacy work that Ramya Matthew has been doing through this forum, through Q. We're indebted to you, Ramya, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Secondly, to express my thanks for the invitation to speak. It's an honor, actually. I think the invitation came after I used the forum after a thought-provoking blog by Matthew Meze, who is here with us today as well. And when you speak up, then people say, "Oh, why don't you tell us a bit more?" So maybe that's where it came from. I'm not really sure, but it's a real honor to share this, and hopefully there's something for you in what I have to share. So suddenly there was a hubbub, a cacophony of noise, trainees standing up with confidence in front of their poster and one by one taking centre stage. Well, in my practice, we tackled missed appointments. In my practice, we realised that those with gestational diabetes were not adequately followed up. In my practice, in my practice, in my practice. This is the point I knew that we had achieved what we set out to do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In that premature display of self-congratulatory rhetoric, I am referring to the monikered day of celebration of the first completed cohort of EQUIP, the QI training programme that I am responsible for having set up for GP trainees in Northern Ireland. I have to say, following the leadership of our then Director of GP Training, Claire Lockery, who saw that this was something that we needed to get ready in our GP training programme in our deanery. In case you have growing concerns, let me assure you that this will not be a look at my beautiful baby session. Far from it. As you will see from the event description, and as Ramya said, I also intend to talk about my baby's bad habits, bad behaviours, deeply flawed personality, not to mention the bad example that is set by its adoptive parents. But let's start with this rather pretty photograph. After 5 months of lockdown, I got to finally go back to my beloved Mourne Mountains at the weekend for what would normally be my weekly constitutional clear the head run. This is dawn from 4 days ago. It was very early in the morning. As a community of improvers, you will understand that context is king. My running partner on Saturday, also a GP, was challenging me about how one answers the question, what do you do? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a GP, but I have a past life, which for many years I kept to myself. I didn't want to think anyone to think any less of me. So my backstory before medicine, I trained in the world of IT. I became a systems analyst, and I went to work for this multinational chemical engineering company where the culture and ethos was all about continuous improvement, not quality improvement, but continuous improvement. I then had a road to Damascus experience. This is the road to Damascus. I was driving along this rather less pretty dual carriageway in Belfast when the notion came to me that I should study to become a doctor. How crazy a thought. I reflected. But there it started, and that was my road to Damascus starting point. As I was a junior doctor, F1s as they now call them, I saw things everywhere that I thought we could improve. And I would find myself, speaking to one of my colleagues, and I'd say, you see the way we calculate the warfarin dosage or some other clever idea? Do you not think it would be safer or better if we, and you'd share some fantastic idea, and your colleague would look at you kind of like blank stares and say, yeah, I suppose it probably would. Will we go for a coffee? Because the culture at the time was not one where those of us who were in the most junior ranks of the workforce were thought to have ideas about how the system might be improved. Far from it. Then in 2013, I read this by Don Berwick, A Promise to Learn, A Commitment to Act, in which he said the NHS should become a learning organisation. And I suddenly was thinking about those lessons I had learned back in industry about embracing continuous improvement. Batalden and David, oops, sorry. Batalden and Davidoff, a bit slowed here for some reason. Batalden and Davidoff reminds us that everyone in healthcare has two jobs: to do their work and to improve it. And I've always loved this habit of Stephen Covey's, it's in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, sharpening the saw. It tells us the story of someone walking through the woods, coming across a stranger sawing down a tree. The sawman is sweating profusely. He has been at the task for several hours and is making little headway. The worker notes that the saw is blunt. Why don't you take a break and sharpen the saw? The worker says. I can't. I'm too busy sawing, is the sawman's reply. When I started this journey, in terms of setting up this program, I reflected on about general practice in primary care, which I love, and I think it's a jewel in the crown of our health service. And I thought how well placed it is for continuous improvement. It's a reputation for committed patient focus. It has strong learning ethos in the GP community. We have practices which are small enough to be agile, and we have an excellent appraisal process which focuses on the praise's insights for improvement. We have the freedom to innovate. We are a contracted service. We have few administrative barriers to service improvement and service redesign. We focus on populations, and we have an existing quality ethos. We have co-op, significant event analysis, and we have embraced over many years the discipline of clinical audit. So it's a great starting point. So I started one day a week in the deanery back in 2014, and I spent late 2014, and I spent a little bit of time reading around, discovering that we didn't actually have a well-designed quality improvement approach for primary care. Waiting in the wings was coming on board was Joanna Bircher, and so things were about to change, but I didn't know that at the time. But I started as anyone who had been asked to set up a program would do. They would think about the organization, and we have training areas, and we have program directors, and we've got trainers. So I set about going around, doing the rounds, doing presentations, talking about this new idea of quality improvement. I was maybe not so overly surprised, but it was quite alarmed to find that that not everyone shared the sort of the vision and passion that I maybe had for what we could do in order to start quality improvement training with trainees. I mean, there's a simple kind of approach. You train the trainers, and the trainers train the trainees, and lo and behold, it all happens. I very quickly realized that endeavoring to do it in that way was going to be like this, pushing a large ball up a very steep hill. I think this comment, which was shared with me not long ago, but would have been one that would have been typical of the time. One GP said, GPs are more interested in outcomes than they are in the process. Surely you need to know the process if you're going to make sure that you have the optimal outcomes, was my reply. But there it is. So I was very aware of the challenges of building capability and capacity for quality improvement among GP trainees. At that stage, there was no QI curriculum. I was reading around IHI. I was reading as widely as I could. And then I came across this person on Twitter who was part of the JNQ program, Joanna Bircher, and we're very grateful for all the work that Joanna has done. And Joanna has become a very close friend and someone who I have the highest of regard for. But we also had other things to contend with. There's a short GP training program, and we're competing with the demands of professional exams, the AKT, the CSA, now called the RCA, the clinical exam, completing the e-portfolio, and lots of other limiting factors. There's limited expertise available, trainees feeling lost, Trainees not wanting to displease their trainers, you know, with if the trainer is thinking that they're being taken away from inverted commas real work, cynicism in the system about QI, and perhaps some limited insight among trainers about QI, and confusing the trainees with conflicting advice, maybe focusing only on things like clinical audit. So there was a mountain to climb in order to get this thing up and running. And yes, audit, audit, audit. It's the perennial term that comes around over and over again. So we set an aim, as you should, as you all know, with any quality improvement endeavours. And we said by the end of GP training, it's not very specific, to give all our GP trainees some of the language, some of the tools, and some experience in quality improvement. That was our aim. Initially, I thought it was about education, but as we got into it, I realized it was actually about experience, and I'm going to expand on that as we go. Education doesn't really do it. It's got to be deeper than that. Ultimately, we're aiming for excellence. And so the 3 E's really became the underpinning goals of EQIP. And I'm going to talk about the logo a little bit later on. We had to think about how we were going to deliver this program. And we adopted something which I had been involved in from 2013 when we went to New Mexico, to Albuquerque, to learn about ECHO, which stands for Extension for Community Healthcare Outcomes. We brought it back to Northern Ireland. Since that, it's started to spread across the UK, particularly through Hospice UK. It's a platform which develops a community of practice, bringing people together from different backgrounds in order to improve the service that we deliver, the care that we deliver, and bringing together different disciplines. With a very small number of people, I realized it was going to be down to us, and we were going to have to reach our trainees through on this platform. So we were combining these things together. We have trainees all over Northern Ireland. As I've already alluded to, I realized that we were not going to get this program delivered by training the trainers to train the trainees. We had to find another way. And we adopted what has now become absolutely core to what we're doing today. We were using Zoom back then, and it was a struggle because most people had never heard of it. Everyone was suspicious of it. No one had the equipment. Everyone wondered if the network would support it. We had to purchase, distribute, train, support all our trainees and all of the practices, and send them out webcams and assure them that it would all be fine, and get permissions from our business services organization that we were not going to crash the network by streaming video over this. But anyway, we pushed on. This is some of the hardest stuff that we did. But in the left-hand side of this photograph, you will see Keith McCollum, the bald-headed chap, just closest to the photograph, and to his left, Brenda Carson. So Keith is a GP and a QI aficionado for many years, finding himself as a lone voice in a very empty room. And to his left, that is Brenda, who is a nurse in the Southeastern Trust in Northern Ireland, who leads quality improvement. And between the 3 of us, we realized it was going to be the 3 of us. And I encouraged them to get involved, because I said, think of it. Every year, with up to 100 trainees coming through, in 5 years, you could have trained 500 of our next generation GPs to have some of that knowledge, insight, skills, experience, and an orientation to quality improvement. If we can't change it one by one in each practice, maybe we can do it slowly but surely. So what are the essential elements? And the thing that I want to say as well, and I'm going to talk about the bad habits and all of those, the thing I want to say is there's no magic what I'm going to tell you today. Anyone who has any interest, experience in educating and training others will understand the elements. You know, if you've been to school, been to university, been through training, you understand this. But I just want to describe to you some of the elements. Our idea was that each trainee, of course, would choose an area for improvement. I have to put on record here. I have to say I've grown rather tired of the word project. It seems so diminishing, and people talk about your project, and I think for others go, it's like talking about your little project, like it doesn't mean anything. So I actually try to drop the word project. This is about area that you have discovered, identified as an area that needs to be improved, and you're taking it forward. We at that stage got our trainees to undertake an ST3 within their practice. And we supported them through 6 echoes. That meant we came together on 6 occasions, all the trainees in their own practices over an hour, 1 hour and a half, with a number of people at the hub, ourselves, with a bit of knowledge, not much more than them, with a curriculum, thanks to Joanna and RCGP, for some short didactic teaching. So just little snippets, 10, 15 minutes, using the QI guides from RCGP, where we would have our trainees starting to share their project ideas, the work that they were going to undertake. The whole idea with this vicarious learning. So not only would you be thinking about the own area of improvement in your practice, you would also be thinking about all those other areas that others were seeking to make improvements in, hoping that that would sow seeds and they would also learn through the experience of others. We also had some Equip Plus sessions, what we call Equip Plus sessions, for one-to-one support to support trainees with any specific questions that they had. We were developing a group of QI mentors for advice and support. And we started to, over time, we started to put the resources together and make them available on a Moodle platform so that trainees could access them at a variety of times. And what we've done in this last year is create a series of bite-sized videos that encapsulate some of that training material. So those are the essential elements. It's about identification, engagement, support, discourse and discussion, and that one-to-one support as is needed. There's nothing magic in anything that we have done, I can assure you. Why Echo? Well, this is a case-based approach, and in fact, it's as old as modern medicine. When Hippocrates gathered his students under the plane tree of Kos in Greece, 500 BC, where the students would come and talk about cases. Actually, as a little kind of anecdote and aside, this tree is right in the center of our medical school at Queen's University. It's a cutting from the plane tree of Kos and is right at the center. So gathering under the plane tree of Kos is now Zoom, and where we share cases and discuss and support one another. I think in using Echo, it's like what we're doing today. It's the wisdom of crowds, it's vicarious learning. And of course, it's also that supporting one another in our journey of learning and making a difference to the future of healthcare that we're involved in. And we very much were adopting an all teach, all learn, all improve. And we wanted to move our trainees from from know how up to what others have called do how. That's what we're aiming for. They leave with some skills, not just with knowledge and not just a box ticked. Now, Joanna and a couple of friends recently described me. We were talking about Honey and Mumford, I think. Honey and Mumford talk about learning styles, and they said, Nigel, you're a theorist. I'm not. I'm a pragmatist. And I went back and looked at what I had done before when I had done the Honey and Mumford test, and I was a pragmatist. But actually, I may have to admit I probably have become moved towards being a bit of a theorist, because theorists do help us understand a little bit how we teach and how we learn. Vygotsky, for example, talks about the zone of proximal development. That's where you come in close contact and you help someone on that learning journey. That idea of creating a scaffold around which you can structure your learning. So I think there's much that we can learn from the theorists. Miller's conceptual framework of competency wants us to go from knowing to knowing how, to showing, to doing, and it's very much what we hope our trainees in this short time will leave the program with, the ability to do. And we're moving more to the behavioral domain away from the purely cognitive domain. The community of practice is really important in what I think we have done, because we have a domain of interest, in this case, quality improvement. We have a community, which is a group of GP trainees who are on a training journey. And we have a practice, which is primary care, general practice. So Lavin Wenger, the community of practice is a helpful model to think about what it is that we are actually about. And it's very much moving away from instruction to integration, where we develop this idea of an improvement community, and that's what we have tried to do, with some of us being a little bit more experienced, a little bit more senior, but all of us on that journey of learning how to improve the system that we operate within. And we've had several more days of celebration, lots of smiling faces, and lots more of those descriptions of in my practice, in my practice, in my practice. Everyone displays their work, everyone has a poster, and the titles of the sort of work they undertake are varied, are fascinating, are inspiring, and there's something that we can all learn from. And here's a few that I've picked out more or less at random. I particularly like this last that last one, which we all can relate to, I think. Suddenly, there was a hubbub, a cacophony of noise, trainees standing up with confidence in front of their poster and one by one taking centre stage. Well, in my practice, we tackled missed appointments. In my practice, we realised that those with gestational diabetes were not adequately followed up. In my practice, in my practice, in my practice. This was the point that I knew that we had achieved what we set out to do. The spontaneous emails which followed from trainees put the icing on the cake for me. I quote, "Just a line to say how good today was," said one. "The most positive and enthusiastic regional GP training day I have been at," said another. It was just great to see GP presented so positively and really confronted the just a GP nonsense that is still out there. And one last one. It was the first event that I have been to in quite a while that I felt feeling positive about our future in general practice, rather than the doom and gloom which has become the norm. It turns out that catching the bug for quality improvement in primary care is not about the teaching or the tools. It's about attitude, it's about personal agency, it's about believing you can make a difference. It's about someone encouraging you to do so. It's about believing that you can be a leader for improvement. I'd like to use the remainder of my time to focus on four things. Sorry, big pardon. I'm skipping ahead of myself a little bit. Just want to talk about Equip Plus and the one-to-one mentorship. You'll see Keith and Brenda at the bottom. We're being joined by some other trainers and GPs, Karen Rogers and Karen Moss, Janet Rogers, and Anya McNeil. But the top line in this group are all recent trainees who have come through the Equip program, and they voluntarily expressed an interest in being mentors for our current cohort of trainees, and they're all involved. Yes, let me talk about then the logo. The logo, I had a sort of a basic one first, but as we started to move forward, I wanted to encapsulate what it was we're about. And the logo encapsulated this idea of a cohort, a group, a community, all together, sharing ideas, sharing one another, supporting one another. We have the Q formed by the circle and the I, and the I is there. And we have the PDSA, the idea of that improvement is a continuous cycle, and that really underpins this idea of education, experience, and excellence. So I have spoken a lot about the beautiful baby, but I'd like to use the rest of the time to focus on four things. And I want to talk a little about structures of training, contractual versus cultural, some paradigm differences between primary and secondary care, and this notion of nurturing curiosity. So we now have a new GP curriculum. It sort of came out a couple of years ago, but it's actually happening now in this current year. A very difficult time to bring a new curriculum amidst all of the changes and all the difficulties and challenges, but nonetheless, this has been in the mix for quite some time. According to the new MRC GP curriculum, we're supposed to be nurturing future doctors who are learning to continuously evaluate and improve the care that they provide. And it sits within this area at the bottom, working well in organizations and systems of care. One of the things which has changed is that rather than doing as we did to conduct the QI program within ST3, which is the last year of training, it is now situated in ST2. And that, I think, it presented us with some difficulties, because certainly in our program at the moment, our trainees only spend 6 months in GP in ST2. It's the first time they're in general practice, perhaps since they were in medical school, or maybe if they spent some time in F2, and they come into the program completely without knowledge about the context in which they are supposed to identify an area for improvement and lead it, and they can doing it in 6 months. So it actually presents with us some challenges that we're just having difficulty to navigate, and I think that this will continue to be a struggle. Things are going to change a little bit in terms of trainees spending 1 year in hospital and 2 years in GP, but I still think that makes it a little bit difficult. The difficulties that trainees in ST3 experienced was that they were trying to thread this among all of the other things that they were doing. One of the things in GP training is the moment at which they achieve their MRC GP, we eject them from into the workforce. They have no extra time in which to mature and develop their skill and their place in the profession. We need a 4th year of training. Many people have said it. I still believe it very much is the case. And in fact, this was that if we had a 4th year of training, this would be the time when you really could nurture a continuous improvement culture and equip our future GP workforce to be the leaders that we need them to be, equipped with these tools. So there are some difficulties, but we have to cut our cloth and work around those. But it's not without a challenge. This is one of the most recent engagements we had with our trainees. I think this actually was in October, and I put it to them, and we used Mentimeter. And I said, answer this. When I mention QI to my trainer, he/she says the following. He/she says, and they were to put that in. So words like eye rolling, dubious, tuts, do not have a nurturing ring to them. So there is still, to some extent, I think, a lack of alignment to the vision for QI in our discipline within many of our colleagues in general practice and primary care, and particularly among trainers. But we will keep going. One of the things I've reflected on, and this is this contractual idea that quality improvement is now contractual in 3 of the 4 devolved nations, as we refer to them, but not Northern Ireland. And I do wonder if making it contractual will shift that orientation among GPs and among our primary care colleagues. Perhaps it will. There's always a risk when you make something contractual, and that it becomes a box that you tick. Perhaps there's a hope that if you make it contractual, in due course, it does in fact also become cultural, and maybe that is yet to be seen. But we don't have that within our GP contract. So as yet, it's not necessarily on the agenda or on the horizon for many GPs in our location. She'll kill me for it because you know she's on the call. This is Karen Walsh, who's GP in our practice, and she is demonstrating what it means to make QI cultural within your practice, and this is where I would love to see all of our practices embracing quality improvement as a cultural norm within their practice. Maybe it can be achieved by making it contractual, but we will have to wait and see. I know that the Health Foundation has been interested in quality improvement, as demonstrated by these documents over the years, going back to 2011, perhaps before, talking about quality improvement from a primary care perspective. And it is really important, I think, for the Health Foundation that they continue to pursue this, because this is an organization with great influence and great opportunities to support. And that we all know that 90% or something of that order of our contact with the public happen in primary care. The place where we are likely to see a sea change of improvement is if we, as a community, manage to raise engagement with quality improvement across that whole profession and across the service which runs in primary care. Interestingly, I was looking at the document to the right, and it's interesting just to read that over those 10 years, the last sentence, in fact, not much has changed since Dora and colleagues highlighted the lack of data on QI in the sector almost a decade ago. So we still have some work to do. Training is one pathway, you know, with the trainees, as I said to my colleagues, and getting them interested in this. But it's interesting just looking on down in the document to see how audit is still top of the tree, and things like model for improvement, process mapping, run charts, root cause analysis, and other tools that might help us are still very much not in the awareness of our colleagues. So there's still some work to do. I got myself into trouble with some of our trainers over the years because we used to say to the trainees, if you use the words first data collection, you get a yellow card, and if you use the word second data collection, it's a straight red. And I made the point to the trainees that, you know, if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. We need to think about have some other tools in the box. But again, this demonstrates just that tension that the trainees feel between us as the training organization and our trainees embedded within a practice and a practice culture, which is still very much rooted to audit being the only clinical tool that is usable and valuable. So I want to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on then the hospital versus community-based care and some of my own sort of thoughts on this over the years. So hospital-based work, especially given how wards and departments are sorted into domain specialisms, are very what I would call quite widgetized, you know, with things that happen within that discipline. I often say to our medical students, if you're a gastroenterologist, not to pick on gastroenterologists for any particular reason, the chances that the next person you see has one of 5 conditions is pretty high. The chances that you will do one of 3 investigations is even higher. Such is the narrowing of scope about the way hospital sorts and organizes its care. And I've witnessed colleagues who in hospitals who over the years who are very much embracing of quality improvement talk about the sort of things they do. Quality improvement work which is looks to improve the uptake and use of sepsis 6 or reducing ventilator acquired pneumonia when you know there's 6 things that you can do and making sure you do that, or pre-op checks. If you work in a narrow scope of practice, it is much more amenable to counting, standardization, run charting, etc. It was in my response to Matthew Meze's post that I started to develop my thinking a little more on the special case for primary care and general practice. The scope of general practice is not so narrow focus or reductive. In general practice, we're more have more focus on relational rather than transactional. We're more dialogic, perhaps, than diagnostic. We focus more on continuity than on episodic, or at least we have an opportunity to do so. We have more of a focus on holism rather than partialism, and we are more inclusive rather than reductive in terms of our focus. And I think that there are perhaps some paradigm differences where QI perhaps gets lost in translation. Many GPs do not even realize that they see the word differently to their hospital colleagues. The transition from a hospital trainee to general practice is perhaps insidious, but they spend a lot of time in hospital doing their training. I think a lot of this has its roots way back at the beginning of the 19th century in the Flexner report, which we had a biomedical focus as a dominant narrative in medical training. We think about diseases, pathologies, etiologies, treatments. In recent years, we've converted those into learning outcomes, competencies, and ever more granular end goals, often leaving the person and the healthcare system out of the discussion. Several years ago, I heard a professor of family medicine from the USA saying when she was an undergraduate student, she realized she didn't just want to be a good doctor, she wanted to be somebody's doctor. And that was a very profound realization in my view. Setting up and leading Equip over the last 5 years has been rewarding in many ways, but truthfully, it has been uphill, not because of the trainees, but because the environment in which the trainees are working at this stage is still a little bit ignorant and maybe a little bit suspicious of this newfangled world of quality improvement. Perhaps that lack of engagement has maybe some of its roots in those paradigm differences between the QI models that we have adopted and which seem to resonate so well in hospital settings. And this is a question, I guess, are the dominant QI models and tools that we are using, which are very useful to us because we do also work in transactions, but maybe they are fundamentally at odds with some of the domains of our clinical care. And it does raise the question with me whether we need to think of reimagine a new QI ethos that is uniquely aligned to the paradigm of clinical practice that is ours. Not to throw out what we already know and what we are already using, but perhaps in a way to nuance some of the tools. And finally, just in the last few minutes, just to talk about what I think is really important is about nurturing curiosity. I think it's the fundamentally most important thing that we can do among trainees and students. We do not live in a perfect world. I don't need to tell you that. Building on my own experience in the industry in the last 30 years, where the normative culture at that time, and I thought was normal, was an ethos of continuous improvement, we have been endeavouring in our little way to build curiosity for QI among our trainees, and hopefully through Equip, and hopefully to make the world that they will lead a little better. I just want to show you a couple of things here. This is a picture of our trainees a few years ago, and I gave them this little task to do. I said, think of your job in the future between these three domains: clinical duties, administrative duties, quality improvement, and innovation. Put an X where you are at the moment, and put an O where you'd like to be in 2 or 5 years or something like that. Just where you'd like to be in the future. They give them all back to me, and I transcribed them onto an acetate, and this is what they looked, all clustered up around clinical. That's where they see themselves. Where do they want to be in the future? They want to be nicely balanced, but they want to be leaders of improvement and innovation. That's what they're searching for in the job that they would go into, the workforce they would go into. I also did a questionnaire research study with one of our medical students who's now an F1 in Glasgow. And if I could ask you maybe not to tweet this anywhere, because we're hoping to submit this very soon for publication. She asked in her work, are trainee doctors leading improvements? If not, why not? Asked the extent to which trainees carry out the role of leading improvement, and to find out what were the barriers and enablers to doing so. It was a cross-sectional study. And one of the aspects was to ascertain the extent to which trainees identified ideas for improvement, were able to share them, and able to implement or act upon the ideas. And these are the results. We had 303 responses, which is 17% of our trainee population, but the response was representative of the Northern Ireland training deanery. In terms of how often do you identify ideas for improvement, 10% said hourly, they are serious improvers, 48% daily, and 32% said weekly. So 90% of our trainees profess to identify things in the work area where they work at least on a weekly basis, 90%. When we move on to the idea of share and act, 30% said they had opportunity to share, and 5% said that they had an opportunity to act on the ideas that they identified. We call this the 90-35 conundrum. What is it we're not doing within what's the conundrum we have to solve that we're not doing within our workplace that helps trainees who are identifying all these ideas, getting them through to share and act. If you even think that, and this is just from UK, all the UK trainees, if each trainee was identifying an idea only weekly, There are 56,000 potentially valuable ideas for improvement every week among doctors in training, which is an incredible number. I like this idea put forward by Thomas Friedman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator, that a combination of maximized curiosity quotient and passion quotient surpasses the indicative potential of IQ. According to growth mindset author Carol Dweck, curiosity quotient can be developed, i.e. nurtured. And I think despite the many challenges we have seen that in Equip over the last 5 years, we have developed some of that. Einstein himself says, "I have no special talents. I'm only passionately curious." My guilty pleasure is to watch YouTube videos of the celebrated conductor Benjamin Zander in his interpretation classes as he awakens musical curiosity in his attendees. My favorite moments are when he chastises his young proteges when they make a mistake and they scowl on their face. He tells them that instead of scowling, they should shout out, "How fascinating!" nurturing curiosity. I finish with the words of Leonard Cohen, a favorite singer-songwriter, who says this: "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Nigel. There was so much there, such rich discussion, and you've covered like a range of topics. Things that really stood out for me personally, I think, are your resilience. It sounds like there have been lots of barriers and lots of potential setbacks in terms of getting this up off the ground, particularly the cynicism from GP trainers and so on. But I can see that you've clearly persevered, and that's paid dividends. And I'm sure, this is going to have, a real sort of legacy in Northern Ireland and beyond. The other sort of things that I'd like to just, touch on is there's the sort of know how to do how. I think that's so important in QI, isn't it? There's so many sort of training courses that people go on, but actually it's the doing that really changes things, and giving trainees that opportunity, I think, is so invaluable. And lastly is also about communities of practice, which I guess Q and this group is also about, and how valuable that is, and how ahead of your times you were to do that all by Zoom when none of us were doing it. And that just shows, the kind of value of innovation as well. I think there's so much to discuss. I'm going to open it out to the floor. Particularly interested in people's thoughts about this new model for QI in primary care, what that might look like, and also what we can do to nurture curiosity, with our peers, our colleagues, trainees alike.
Can I just say, I see Niamh Woods is joining the call. So I don't know if Niamh is on, but just Niamh is the author and led the work that we've done with trainees. So it's great to see Niamh joining us. She's an F1 in Glasgow.
Right, thanks, Niamh. Liz has said here about there being an envious level of QI training for the medical workforce compared to some of the other primary care workforce. What do you think of that, Nigel?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for what happened across the UK more broadly, but certainly we have not had a lot of investment in that. Louise Sands, who's on the call here, led a couple of years ago a program that was called Share, which ran, I think, maybe twice, and it was trying to engage with practice managers, and that did engage people for sure. And we purposely didn't call it, I should say Louise purposely didn't call it QI in order not to frighten people off, and that was quite successful, but it was a limited window of funding. And so we haven't done that. I mean, one of the things that I way back, I did it maybe 2016. I attended the Academy of Royal Medical Colleges ran a QI day in London, and I was really taken that day by the presence of the East London Foundation Trust, who seemed to be like the main attendees and leading all the work. and Amir Shah, I think, is the person who's responsible for that. And they took a an approach going, we need to build capability and capacity throughout our trust, and they had mentors through to advocates through to all different types of people, and I think that demonstrates if you want to shift the needle, you have to make that kind of investment. But yes, hospital trusts have at their disposal a large pot of money. And I said this when I met with the chief medical officer here, saying, if you were the head of BP or some other big industry, you would set aside 5% of your budget in order to build up capability and capacity for the kind of organization you want it to be. And we, as a kind of maybe it's because of our contracted status or contractual status of small independent practices, something maybe in that means that there's not the big corporate, we need to invest in this. And we have these conversations all the time with colleagues in trusts. They can't understand how that within that contractual model that we can't just set aside 5% of the working week in order to nurture this. But I know that again, knowing Joanna, I know that Manchester have invested in this, but I think it's patchwork across the UK, and and the college have done a great job again providing resources, but I think we need the next step, which is also to get momentum, traction, momentum, engagement, training, and I say maybe putting it into the contract maybe helps to do that. Maybe it is, and maybe 5 years time we'll say people are naturally embracing it. I'm not sure, but possibly.
Joanna's pointed out here about practice managers again. So I think they're often quite well placed because they've got a bird's eye view of what's going on in a practice. And I know in England, certainly the Time for Care programme, much of that has been aimed at practice managers. And I think that's worked quite well. And also pharmacists, actually on the ground, it's a lot of the pharmacists that are doing bits of QI work and are really driving change. And that again has made a real difference in England, I think. But yeah, it's all about culture, isn't it? It's bringing people in, making them feel like they've got the permission to do this stuff. Would you contract, Nigel? And I was quite keen to get others' views because obviously it's different in England. QI is now in the GP contract here, and it has been for the last couple of years. Has anyone got a view on whether that's made a difference in terms of people's perception of QI and its value? Joanna, have you got any thoughts?
Hi, it's Elizabeth here. So I know we have an antimicrobial resistance QI slot in the contract, but it hasn't landed yet. But I've been a bit involved with the ask that's gone into the RGCP, who I think are developing the content for that. So I haven't seen any output from the existing previous year's QI QOF, I think it's called. But I will obviously be looking closely to see what the AMR output looks like, but it hasn't happened yet to sort of, see whether that's delivered some good improvement activity. I'm not even sure how one would capture the learning from that.
So in terms of the QI and QOF, the first 2 modules that went live were due to be kind of submitted and I guess evaluated just before COVID hit last March, and so really pretty much everything's been put on hold, and now the focus is clearly around early cancer diagnosis and learning disability health check. So I don't think there's an AMR one due to land in the QOF QI modules, but I do know that CCGs, for as long as they exist in England, certainly you'll know all about that. Of course, Elizabeth will be tasked with their targets related to reduction in broad spectrum.
Do you think that there were originally going to be 5 QAF QIs and one was allocated to AMR. I thought it was in financial year 22.
Oh gosh,
So
the whole timetable is completely gone now.
Okay, so do you
Yeah.
think that might have disappeared completely then?
I don't think anything with something as important as that will disappear completely.
I hope not.
And also it's so I think it's very amenable to a kind of QI approach, because certainly we've had that. Just preparing a paper, well, I'm not writing it, I'm a co-author on a paper on some work we did in our CCG area on using a very, very simple QI approach to antimicrobial, to broad spectrum antibiotic prescribing. We tried to reduce by 10%, even though we were already at threshold, and did it by looking at using kind of data, continuous measurements, and hopefully nurturing curiosity. And actually we managed to achieve the 10% reduction without setting GPs any targets or payment by results. So obviously that filled me with joy that you could do something without payment by results. Not to say that they weren't paid to join in the programme, they were paid for their time in joining in, but they weren't paid for achieving the targets. And I think Nigel made that fantastic point. Once you start to make something contractual, you change the relationship with it. But for some people, that's their motivating factor that I think I've learned over the years, is that everybody is motivated differently, and we need to use different motivating factors for different groups. We can't expect everyone to just want to do it because it feels like the right thing to do. But yeah, so I sorry, Elizabeth, I don't think it's been forgotten completely, but it's not going to, I would think, highly unlikely to be 2022.
I will undo, Joe. Can you share that when you do publish whatever you've done? That'd be great.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not the main author. I'm the kind of secondary QI person on it, and I just saw it. I to give my comments on it yesterday, so I'm quite excited about it. I will definitely share.
Nigel, I love the bit where you put up the titles of the various posters and presentations, because it really captures how much of an impact this actually has on patient care. And I think Ramesh has asked in the chat whether or not there's going to be a repository of the work that's been done, so that people can go and try and sort of replicate something similar where they are.
Yes, they are on a website. It's not a very well currently very well designed website, but there is Louise Sands, who's on the call, is been working on another place for those. I just maybe ask Louise to the extent to which we've moved to that, and I certainly can share where they are. You can flick through, but yeah, Louise.
Yep, so the new website, which is again with a lot of input from the key players in Northern Ireland, is aiming to be a go-to place for quality improvement for primary care. And at the moment, the greatest resource we have are the equip projects, and it's just trying to work out how best to theme them and style them, because really what we're hoping is that people will come to the site with a question or a problem. So they're not coming as QI experts, or they may be enthusiasts, but probably the aim will be to bring people because they're looking for a solution and they're looking for help. So it's been fantastic to have all those resources, but in terms of the techie bit and trying to move them, to have them in searchable formats so we can put them in clinical or communication. So that's a bit of work in progress, but we're moving in that direction. In the meantime, yes, they are available on its SEQI website, but again, not in a way in which somebody could go in and search for one of those lovely titles, maybe gout or diabetes, and be able to pick up projects that were under those themes, or perhaps using a particular type of computer system or in a particular area that might link into other people locally. So that, with a lot of help, is the direction of travel. So any ideas or thoughts? I know I've talked to Joanna about this, that we were working on it. So I'm really keen to know, and having looked at lots of really good websites in the mainland and elsewhere, just to get some ideas and thoughts. But I mean, the bulk of what we have to put there would be based on the equip projects.
So I've just popped in the chat the place where they currently are. So you can have a look at them. Obviously, there's a great range in quality. And do they all look like perfect QI projects? No, they don't. Do I care? Not really, because what was important for us was that our trainees engaged with this concept of a whole range of new tools that they've left the program with some completed work, but more importantly, they have had experience of taking a QI approach to improving care for patients. But you can have a look at them, so just click on that link, and that's where they currently are. But yeah, thanks to Louise, all the work she's doing and making a platform that could be used by our wider community to look for areas that they're interested in.
Elizabeth has also asked, is the network in HexiTime? I've got to admit that I don't actually know about HexiTime. Elizabeth, can you enlighten us?
Well, I did add baby steps from my point of view. So HexiTime was a Q Exchange winner that's gone on to do great things. And the idea is a sort of swap shop for skills and expertise. And that you put in, you can help with X, Y, and Z, and someone might approach you, and then you bank that, and then you can approach someone when you need help with X, Y, and Z. But I joined a HexiTime Tea Time event with Matthew, if you're still on the call, last week, and it was interesting that there are networks in HexiTime, not just individuals. And I thought that was quite interesting because that did allow networks to network, and that just was what got me thinking about Equip, really. Because it sort of gets you the potential for rapid dissemination, or rapid connectivity, I should say. With just a thought. I'm definitely a HexiTime virgin, baby, just learning.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. We're almost out of time, but I did want to see if we could just touch on this new model of QI for primary care, just because it feels like such an important topic. I think you made some really good points there, Nigel, about how a lot of QI has been centered, or the successful bits of QI have been around very process-driven things like pre-op checks and sepsis 6 and so on. Whereas actually, yeah, it's a totally different paradigm in general practice, isn't it? Where it's much more about relationships. But I'm still personally struggling to understand what this looks like. How do we transform this current model of QI to something that works for this relational care? And
I wonder, Ramya, whether we need to, or we could invite in the continuity group that are working with the college and with Health Foundation that Mark Rickenbach's leading, because he's certainly taking a QI approach to something which is fundamental to what we do in general practice, which is the relationship-based stuff. It would be really nice if they could maybe present to one of these, and we could open up the discussion about how that's relevant in other places. It might be a good starting point.
That sounds like a great idea. I really want to give this topic time, because it yeah, like I said, it just feels huge, but and also, yeah, massively important if we're going to make headway in terms of doing QI, that is fitting for general practice. So yeah, I encourage everyone to sort of keep thinking about it, keep sharing ideas around it. And I think that's a good kind of practical step that we can take in terms of inviting those working on continuity in the college. Any other final thoughts?
Ramya, I'd be quite keen to raise this with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society as the 4 Nation, actually, College for Pharmacists, I guess. So that does cover 4 nations. Because, I've been banging on a bit about it with them, and they have got Claire Morrison in as the chair of the RPS in Scotland, who's a fabulous quality improver, very expert. And so I think there might be some opportunity to get some engagement going, and from a collaborative point of view, because I noticed a lovely comments about pharmacists are quite engaged in GP practices, and I think probably community pharmacists aren't, because they have less opportunity, because they work very solo, it feels sometimes, although they aren't, they're part of a team. But I think it's a bit more challenging maybe. Yeah, so I mean, I could pick this up with Claire Morrison on behalf of the RPS, just to see whether we could get any engagement, even if they just join the group. Would be a start, wouldn't it, to see the conversations in the chat. I don't know how many pharmacists are in this SIG.
There are a handful, but we could.
It's not massive, is it?
No. Yeah, thanks, Liz. I'm going to try and wrap up now, if that's okay. Thank you, Nigel, so much. I'm sort of in awe of the work that you've done.
Finishing now, so I'll get the
There's a lot of appetite here to learn from what you have done. So I think let's keep this conversation going and see how we can share this great work. Also, just want to say that actually I'm particularly enjoy this session because I'm feeling like we're getting the value of the Q Primary Care group, and that's sort of taken a bit of time to evolve, but actually we're making connections, and yeah, the idea of bringing people together around topics that are key to general practice, I think is, invaluable. And I hope that we can all continue to contribute towards that. So thank you everybody that's been on the call today.
Thanks very much indeed for the invitation, Ramya. Thank you.